Have you ever heard of the man who became so powerful that his own friends feared he'd destroy their beloved republic? A leader so influential that even after his death, his name became a title used by emperors for centuries? Today, we're diving into the fascinating story of Julius Caesar, the man who changed the course of Roman history forever. And stick around, because we're going to uncover why his downfall was just as dramatic as his rise to power. Julius Caesar wasn't born a king or even a man of great wealth. He was born into a patrician family, yes, but they weren't exactly rich. Rome was a chaotic place during Caesar's youth. Power struggles, corruption, and endless wars were tearing the republic apart. Yet even as a young man, Caesar showed ambition. He knew he wanted something more, something greater. There's a lesser-known story from his early life that shows just how determined Caesar was. While traveling by sea, he was kidnapped by Cilician pirates. They demanded a ransom of 20 talents of silver. But Caesar laughed at them. He insisted they were undervaluing him and demanded they raise the ransom to 50 talents. For over a month, Caesar lived among the pirates. He treated them like subordinates and even joked that he would have them all crucified once freed. And you know what? After his ransom was paid, Caesar raised a fleet, hunted down the pirates, and carried out his promise, crucifying them all. But in true Caesar fashion, he showed mercy by slitting their throats before the crucifixion, making their deaths quicker. Caesar's charisma and cunning were evident even then. Imagine the audacity of a young man, held hostage, joking with his captors and planning their downfall. It was a glimpse of the ruthless ambition that would drive him to greatness. Another overlooked event from Caesar's early life was his political skill during the funeral of his Aunt Julia. Julia was the wife of the legendary Gaius Marius, and during her funeral, Caesar made sure to display the images of Marius, a bold move considering Marius was considered an enemy of the state at the time. By doing this, Caesar was signaling his allegiance to the Marian faction and gaining support from the common people. His journey began in the military. Caesar quickly rose through the ranks, proving himself to be a skilled commander and a charismatic leader. And he wasn't just good on the battlefield. Caesar was smart, charming, and persuasive. He knew how to make powerful friends and how to use those connections to climb the ladder. But Caesar wasn't just a soldier. He was a politician, and a brilliant one. He formed an alliance with two of Rome's most influential men, Pompey, a powerful general, and Crassus, the richest man in Rome. This partnership was known as the First Triumvirate. Together they controlled most of Rome's political system. But Caesar wanted more than just being part of a powerful trio. He wanted to be the most powerful man in Rome. As consul, he pushed through reforms and policies that won him popularity with the common people. After his consulship, he became the governor of Gaul, and that's where things really started to heat up. One little-known incident shows Caesar's knack for manipulation. During his consulship, his political opponents tried to undermine him at every turn. But Caesar, knowing he needed allies, cleverly arranged public spectacles, lavish games, banquets, and parades to win over the masses. The people adored him, and the more popular he became, the more his enemies feared him. During his time as governor, Caesar waged a series of wars in Gaul, which is basically modern-day France and Belgium. For nearly a decade, he led his troops to victory after victory, expanding Rome's territory and making himself incredibly rich and famous. One of the most incredible stories from the Gallic Wars was the siege of Alesia. Caesar faced a desperate situation, surrounded by both the fortified city of Alesia and a massive relief army trying to break his siege. But instead of retreating, Caesar ordered his men to build a double line of fortifications, one to keep the besieged inside and the other to fend off reinforcements. Against all odds, Caesar emerged victorious, proving his brilliance as a commander. Another fascinating detail: During the Gallic Wars, Caesar reportedly crossed the Rhine River, not by ship, but by building a bridge, an engineering marvel for the time, built in just 10 days. His intention? To intimidate the Germanic tribes by proving he could march his army anywhere he pleased. Once his point was made, he dismantled the bridge and returned to Gaul. It was psychological warfare at its finest. But Caesar's ambition went beyond military conquest. He also wrote extensively about his campaigns, crafting his own legend with words as much as with the sword. His commentaries on the Gallic War were written to make him appear as Rome's hero, highlighting his courage and genius for all to admire. But power always creates enemies, and Caesar's biggest enemy was his old friend Pompey. They used to be allies, but now they were rivals. Pompey and the Senate were terrified of Caesar's growing power and popularity. So, they ordered him to leave his army behind and come back to Rome as an ordinary citizen. But Caesar refused. Instead, he made a bold move. He led his army across the Rubicon River in 49 BC, knowing it meant war. As he crossed, he famously said, "The die is cast," meaning there was no turning back. This was no ordinary war. It was a fight between two legends, Pompey, the respected general loved by the Senate, and Caesar, the brilliant leader adored by his soldiers and the people. Caesar was outnumbered at first, but he was a master strategist. During the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC, Pompey's forces were much larger, but Caesar's tactics were genius. He lured Pompey's cavalry into a trap and completely crushed them. Pompey's army fell apart, and he had no choice but to flee to Egypt, hoping to find safety. But things went horribly wrong for Pompey. The young Egyptian king, Ptolemy XIII, wanted to impress Caesar. So, he had Pompey killed as soon as he arrived. When Caesar finally made it to Egypt and was presented with Pompey's severed head, he was horrified. This wasn't a victory for Caesar. It was a tragedy. But Caesar's troubles in Egypt were just beginning. He arrived in Alexandria and found himself caught in a messy civil war between the teenage king Ptolemy XIII and his sister Cleopatra. Cleopatra needed help, and she was smart. She had herself smuggled into Caesar's chambers wrapped in a rug to ask for his support. Caesar was impressed by Cleopatra's charm and intelligence. He decided to support her claim to the throne, which led to a fierce conflict known as the Alexandrian War. It all came to a head at the Battle of the Nile in early 47 BC. Caesar's forces were small, but he was a genius when it came to strategy. He teamed up with local allies and launched a daring attack against Ptolemy's much larger army. Caesar's forces, bolstered by reinforcements from Mithridates of Pergamum and Antipater the Idumean, clashed with Ptolemy XIII's army along the Nile Delta. Despite being outnumbered, Caesar's tactics worked. Ptolemy tried to escape the battlefield by boat, but he drowned in the Nile River. With Ptolemy dead, Cleopatra took full control of Egypt. She and Caesar became lovers and political allies, strengthening Caesar's power even further. Cleopatra even gave birth to a son named Caesarion, claiming he was Caesar's child. For Cleopatra, this was huge. She believed that their son could one day rule not just Egypt, but also Rome. And now, with Egypt firmly under his control, Caesar's power was greater than ever. With Pompey gone, Caesar returned to Rome as the unrivaled ruler. But his ambitions went beyond mere victory. Caesar declared himself dictator for life, a title that would prove his undoing. While he brought stability and reform to a chaotic republic, he also amassed power like no one before him. He expanded the Senate, increasing its membership to over 900, but most of these new senators were his supporters. He introduced the Julian calendar, the basis of the calendar we still use today. Roads were built, debts were relieved, and veterans were granted land. To the people, Caesar was a hero. To the elites, he was a tyrant. During one of his many public appearances, Mark Antony attempted to place a laurel crown on Caesar's head, symbolizing kingship. Caesar refused, supposedly to show his humility, but many suspected it was a carefully orchestrated act to gauge public reaction. It did not go well. The crowd remained silent, and Caesar's enemies saw his ambitions more clearly than ever. Yet Caesar seemed untouchable. He was surrounded by loyal supporters, loved by the commoners, and revered as a military genius. And that brings us to one of the most famous betrayals in history. On March 15th, 44 BC, the Ides of March, a group of senators, including his trusted friend Brutus, stabbed him to death right in the Senate house. The plotters believed they were saving the Republic from a tyrant. But Caesar's murder was not the end of his influence. It was the beginning of an even bloodier conflict. An untold aspect of the assassination is the emotional struggle of Brutus. Raised as a son by Caesar, Brutus was torn between his loyalty to Rome and his personal affection for Caesar. Many accounts suggest Caesar's last words were not "et tu, Brute," but rather something simpler and more heartbreaking. A shocked, almost whispered, "You too, child." The senators stabbed Caesar 23 times, but it was said that only one of the wounds was truly fatal. After his death, his body was left on the marble floor of the Senate, blood pooling around him. Rome had not been saved. It had been thrown into chaos. Caesar's death did not restore the Republic. Instead, it led to a power struggle that ended with the rise of his adopted heir, Octavian, later known as Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Even in death, his influence was so powerful that later rulers took his name. The titles Kaiser in Germany and Tsar in Russia both came from Caesar. But perhaps the most fascinating part of Caesar's story is the lesson it teaches about power, ambition, and betrayal. He was a man who climbed to the top through sheer will and charisma, only to be brought down by those closest to him. But even as he fell, he laid the foundation for the very empire that would rule the world for centuries to come. So, what do you think? Was Caesar a hero who transformed Rome for the better, or a tyrant who deserved his fate? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into history, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more incredible stories. Until next time, thanks for watching.